addiction. Every one of us, from the time we're born, we start making our way in between the physical world and our inner world, and how much of this physical world we absolutely are going to start. Here's the operative word: craving. Craving. Hi, everybody. Time for another archetype. You know, this time it's Sunday afternoon, and I have a little extra time. So I thought I would take on the Addict, and I need time because this archetype for me is so complex, and it embodies so many other points of view for me that I'm a little nervous that I can even get my message across in 20 or 25 minutes. I'll do my best. So I'm going to start big and go down. I've said, as many of you know, I'm constantly teaching that power is the fundamental ingredient in the human experience. That the older I get, the more I look at life, the more I see it from this position of co-creation, that we are here to experience what we create, and that become empowered enough so that what motivates us to create what we do through the choices we make, through the attitudes we maintain, is that we shift from being takers to being givers, from realizing that the greatest things we can do is to utilize our life force to make life better for others. Now, the transition from our love of power to the power of love brings us to the path that really defines the person in modernity, that we are driven by a need to discover ourselves, a need for self-empowerment, a need for this, to understand the self, to pursue the self, to everything is about the self, self-healing, self-empowerment, self-motivation, self. But really, at the end of the day, what all of that is about is actually developing self-esteem. And I actually don't mean it in the psychological, emotional way of self-esteem. I mean it in the major league cosmic way of really getting to that mystical awareness that the most precious thing you have is the power of your spirit. And that is what empowers every choice you make. That is what empowers the world around us. That is what makes us agents of change. And I think because we are just now learning that, it has created this epidemic of narcissism, of thinking everything we say is so important, everything we do is so important, every opinion we have is so important. But all of that is part of us discovering how powerful every thought we have really is. We're exploring that power now on the battlefield of each other, but the greater truth is that we are evolving to the place where we're beginning to maybe recognize that every word we say is a profound act of creation. And in order to manage the power of our spirit, we have to esteem that power. We have to really get it out of the church, out of religion, out of all that nonsense, just because that is the nature, the organic nature of the cosmos. We are here for a short period of time and then we cycle off. I mean, it is just this constant cosmic journey. And I'm no longer religious about anything. It is just the way it is. And to me, the divine is organic, but and this is what we're evolving out of, is the era of religion into a bio-spiritual ecology where we get that God is law and that the choices we make engage the mystical laws of creation, and we're held accountable for that. So that the capacity to actually have control over yourself, so that, and now I'm going to bring in Jesus and Buddha, so that you are in the world but not of the world, so that you get what is illusion in this world, that the power is in you, not in an object. Like Buddha would say, to give an object power is the illusion. This pen has no power whatsoever. It has the capacity to write, but it has no power. But if I told my students, this is a magic pen, and every time I sit down to write something, it simply starts writing down lotto numbers, I could spin a narrative, and people would start craving this. And the next thing you know, right, it's just fake nonsense. But I would have engaged the greed in some people, the fantasy in some people. And what Buddha says is, everything is a fantasy. Everything you're looking at is a fantasy. We have assigned value to everything. We've assigned worth and value to absolutely everything. Nothing is of anything unless we assign it. It's all in the world behind our eye before it goes forward. And Jesus would say, go ahead, be in the world, do whatever you want, but don't be of the world. Don't sell your spirit. Don't sell your soul in order to have something of this world. Don't sell your integrity. Don't sell your creativity. Don't sell yourself, because you won't get it out. Which brings me now to addiction. So what is addiction? So think about the purpose of life when we incarnate. And now once we're in our form, we are dealing in duality, the power of our inner world and the power of matter. Matter, energy, grace, soul, with the two different dimensions. And if you look at life, whether you're looking at what illness is, what struggles are, what truth is, everything is about your capacity to maintain your power when up against an illusion. Today, here, I'll give you something. I got this, an email, and it was a fake email. It was a con thing, and everything in me just went, it doesn't feel right. This does not feel right. So I checked on it, and sure enough, it was one of those con things that they try and solicit information from you. But immediately, what if I had believed what they said? Because they always go for your weak link. We have something of yours. Da 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 da. And I would sit back and I thought, what? How could you have something of mine? This is just, you put up discernment, you put up suspicion, whatever you want to call it. But you start out with, wait a minute here. I don't think so. And even if you did, you're going to keep it, but I'm not opening up this email. So, addiction. Every one of us, from the time we're born, we start making our way in between the physical world and our inner world. And how much of this physical world we absolutely are going to start, here's the operative word, craving. Craving. What we decide we absolutely have to have. We absolutely, I like cashmere sweaters, but I don't have to have them. Okay, I don't crave them. I'm not up all night thinking, where can I get another cashmere sweater? All right, it's just, you have to monitor what it is. You can be in the world, love your cashmere, but would I compromise myself for would I tell a lie to get a cashmere? Would I sell my integrity for a sweater? Hell no. You know, you no. All right. So I don't crave these. I love them, but I am in them, but not of them. Okay. So I'm in the world, but it's not owning me. Now, if I got to sugar, I have a different kind of struggle with, in that I actually have to struggle with not eating sugar. We're into a different thing. Now, let me give you a little analogy. Imagine that your mind is your Papa Bear, and your heart is Mama Bear, and your throat is Baby Bear. So it's your sixth chakra, your fifth, and your fourth. And these three are in charge of managing your choices, your power, okay? And addiction is when we develop cravings that are out of control, and they then have authority over our mind, our reason, our heart, and therefore our body. They make us do things. My brother was an alcoholic. He died of alcoholism, and he didn't want to, but his mind, he couldn't get his heart, Papa Bear and Mama Bear, to agree. What heals an addiction, what makes you healthy, what makes you whole, what makes us whole, is when all of our chakras are aligned and we are, and here's the operative word, congruent. When we're congruent, how we think and how we feel are in alignment. And when they're in alignment, when Papa Bear and Mama Bear are in alignment, then Baby Bear is not in conflict and doesn't have to say, hey, what am I choosing today? Am I choosing something mental, or am I following the heart? Am I following the mind? Da, 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 da. How many times I've been with people who have this with, I know, I'm thinking about this, but I'll tell you how I feel. I'm thinking, but I feel. I'm thinking, but I feel. They, I know for a fact, they're addicts. They have to be addicted to something, because Baby Bear will always want to push for parents to be aligned, to have Papa Bear and Mama Bear be aligned, to have the head and the heart work as a unit. And when conflict comes up, you have to jam the fifth chakra, so you don't let the conflict actually create a connection between the head and the heart. So you recognize that, for example, the head says, I think I need some sugar, and my heart then would say, you better not, but then I'll switch the argument. Well, you've had a bad day. Just have a little bit. And the head says, you can't do this. It's not good for you. Blah, 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 blah. And out of frustration, I'll make up an excuse. I've just had a bad day. I've had a good day. I've had any kind of day. I did. This I have to satisfy. And so I'll let these two battle it out. But in the meantime, I grab an Oreo. Okay? That's what we do. And we do this. This is how addiction happens. We keep our head and our heart in two different worlds. And one of them is often wounded. We oftentimes use wounds as a way of keeping ourselves from healing. We keep getting ourselves congruent, especially with the addict, where you will, I remember how many conversations with my brothers saying, your drinking is out of control. And immediately he knew this, but of course he brings out wounds. But I had da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And whoosh, down goes vodka down his gullet. And in healing, you have to get to a place where your head says, you're absolutely right. I am drinking because I am wounded. And I have to face that. I have to admit that. I have to own it. You start aligning these two forces so that the choices you make recognize what's coming from your head and your heart. Now, here's something that is one of those mystical facts. When your head and your heart are aligned, you have a different relationship with time and space. You actually do. What you start experiencing is that time it feels like time is going faster. It feels like things are just happening simultaneously. But what's really, and this is so hard to communicate, but when you are congruent, when what you think, how you feel, is the way you talk, is the way you think. When you're operating like this, a way to think about that is that you've shifted to vertical speed. You're like in vertical speed, like how you think and how you feel, whoosh, is just congruent. And so you're not jamming your circuits with, well, I tell you how I think, but then this is how I feel, and when you are jammed and you are jamming your circuits like that, the result is you don't make any choices. Well, I'll think about this tomorrow. So there's a log jam in what gets moved. Well, maybe I'll clean this up tomorrow. Maybe I'll get around to this tomorrow. Maybe I'll do this tomorrow. It's tomorrow. But when you're clear about what you know, how you feel, then you choose and things move. And so you're moving at more of the speed of light than at the speed of matter. Okay? This is why in healing it is so essential to become congruent, to get your head lined up with your heart, to make choices that reflect the reality of what's in your head and in your heart, and to get these two forces operating so that you are not in conflict, so that during the day you make one type of choice, you make head choices, and then in the evening you'll say, how many people, let's kick back and get a drink, and I'll tell you how I know what I said I thought, but I'll tell now that the sun's gone down and we're in a different atmosphere, I'll tell you how I feel. And people who think one way and feel another never get anything fully accomplished because there's too many people inside of them. And the way that they sustain that is through addiction, because they'll crave something on the outside world that allows them to maintain this separation of church and state, of head and heart, of body and soul. And you have to do something that distracts the conflict between these two parts of yourself. And it could be anything from being addicted to manipulative tactics, being addicted to substance, being addicted to exercise. It is a form of choice that you engage to distract contact from your head and heart. It doesn't have to be a substance. It could be complaining. You're addicted to complaining. You're addicted to whatever it is, to all kinds of behavior that distracts your head and your heart from making contact and connection with each other. And to me, that is really the source, the core source of addiction, is that we don't want our head and our heart to get into an alignment. So we have cravings that become the sources of our choices without thinking. Because what a craving is, it's like time for sugar. I didn't even have to think about it. I just start craving it. It's time for booze. It's time for heroin. It's time, whatever. It's time to, it doesn't matter. The habits we engage in, that we are addicted to, make choices for us, and we don't have to think it. If we don't have to think, we oftentimes can avoid the conflict. Unless, of course, people start pointing out conflicts like you need to go to AA and, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, I think that every one of us cycles through some experience of the addict. Every one of us, because every one of us has patterns that are cravings. It's just that, for the addict, that is a substance addict or a alcohol addict or something, where the addiction is actually harmful like that in a direct way, that's one type of addict. But the other kinds of addictions, like addictions to attention, addictions to always needing to be right, patterns of behavior that are in themselves distractive, but they are what they are. They too are patterns that stop us from going deeper and becoming more reflective about why we make the choices we do. What is driving our power? What is threatening our power? What are we finding threatening about someone else's power? And to me, the end of the day, the object is always, always, always to be congruent, to become whole. I mean, look at what the template is in the atmosphere. Everything is pushing us to holism. Everything. Environmental climate change, pandemics, how we see our body, mind, spirit template, every single thing. How we are now understanding that the body is an integrated system of life. How we need to understand nature. Everything is about becoming whole. And whole means becoming congruent. And congruent means that we have to make choices that do not come from a splintered place where we think one way and feel another. And really, do you realize how, I mean, I'm not even going to go down this path, but I'm convinced that this shift of the head and the heart, which is the anima and animus at a cosmic level, it is huge what I'm talking about, has so much to do with how we are experiencing shifts in how we understand sexuality, the separation of that's the male, that's the female, this is that. These boundaries are simply beginning to fade as we move into what will be the holistic era of humanity. We are on the beginnings of this. We will not see the end of it. It is who knows how many centuries to unfold. But that's the direction we're going. We're not going backwards to the good old days. There aren't any good old days. Those are over. We're going into holism. And how we approach ourselves, how we understand ourselves. Does this choice make me whole, or is this splintering? And if you speak to yourself and you say, I have to think about it, but this is how I feel, I want you to sit back and think, I'm doing it again. I am splintering myself. And then watch if that doesn't activate a craving in you. And even if that craving is an addiction to excuses and to procrastination and postponement, that you're just addicted to not moving forward. Okay? All of these are forms of holding on to power in a certain way and fearing the speed of change if you became more congruent and less addicted. We're all in this boat together, by the way. I mean, no human being gets to adulthood without establishing a field of cravings. None of us does. That's just not the way it's written, people. So we're all in this together. And it's a matter of spotting your cravings and then realizing I'm in a battle here between that thing controlling my fifth chakra and me getting my head and my heart together. Okay, thank you, everybody.